Linny.
Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on the front porch.
Linny, today we interview Dr. Larry Widman about his book, Max Out Mindset. In the mindset world, Dr. Larry Widman is known as Doc. And it's very appropriate we are recording this episode on New Year's Eve, just about 10 hours before the start of the new year. This book is subtitled Proven Strategies That Prepare You and Your Team for Battle in Business, Sport, and Life.
In this book, Doc describes 15 powers that will help readers achieve an elite mindset. And it's so applicable just for all people in all sports and business. It was really interesting. And you know what? I think our listeners are going to be really interested in hearing how he thinks I can improve pickleball through changing my self-talk.
Yeah, that is a highlight for sure.
Oh, my.
Doc completed his medical school training at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and has over 20 years of experience as a psychiatrist working as a high-performance mindset coach. He works with CEOs, professional athletes, Olympians, and many Division I NCAA teams. He has been integral in many high school championships and 5 NCAA Division I national championships, helping athletes, teams, and coaches develop elite mindset skills.
And we got him on our front porch. We're so excited. Let's get to it, Nance.
All right.
Welcome to the front porch, Doc.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thanks so much, Doc, for joining us. So today we want to max out our mindsets for the new year. We are recording this episode with you on New Year's Eve. So can you tell us the difference between New Year's resolutions and the max out mindset approach?
That's a great question, especially for New Year's. But really, when we think about New Year's resolutions, what are they? They're really just a goal that we set for the year. But the typical New Year's resolution is just what we call a simple outcome goal, whatever it may be. I want to spend more time with my family. I want to get in shape. I always tell people there's a couple of reasons why the science shows us at such a high level that by February 1st, New Year's resolutions, 75, 90% are out the door. And it's because human beings aren't very good at setting detailed goals. And so the first part that's different is that I call it a SMART goal. So it's still an outcome goal, but instead of, I want to lose weight, which I call that an outcome goal, a SMART goal would be, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 3 months because I have my 10-year high school reunion coming up. And so one of them is much more specific. You can measure it. How much do you want to lose? And what time period is part of the SMART goal? And then I always say the first part specific. I want to lose 20 pounds. Can you measure that? That's the M. A is achievable. If you told me you wanted to lose 100 pounds in 4 months, I'd say, is that realistic?
Yeah.
So that's the achievable part. And then is it relevant? I mean, sometimes we come up with really horrible reasons why we set a goal, or it's not very relevant to our situation or even our most important. Again, if you have 5 or 6 pounds where most people would say you're kind of normal and you want to lose 20, 25 pounds, and you have to start to wonder, is that a concerning piece? And then what time period? So I call it a SMART goal. It's still an outcome goal. So that's half of the difference between the resolution, the typical one, and what I said. And then the other part is what we call the process goals, meaning all those ingredients that you need to do every day to lose that 20 pounds in 3 months or to save that $1,000 in 6 months. There are things that you have to do every day and every week to get there. And human beings don't set specific enough goals, for one, and then don't spend the time to write down the ingredients every day to get there. And those are the two primary reasons why people fall short of their goals on New Year's.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you talked a little bit about also being flexible. So if you are looking partway through your goal period or at the end of the goal period and you realize you didn't meet the goal, I really like this idea of being flexible and first of all, looking at, did you follow your process or not? And if you followed your process and you still didn't reach your goal, what would be your suggestions?
What you're talking about is one of the few reasons that we have control over that will help us improve the chances of reaching that goal. And that's being willing to adapt and be flexible. And I always tell people there's two reasons why you don't reach your goal. The first one is that you honestly did follow everything that you set out in your ingredients. And sometimes we put our best plans out there and they don't always work. And we have to go what I call back to the drawing board. But the more likely reason is what you said, which is we didn't do all the things we said we were going to do. And maybe life got in the way. Maybe we were going to go to the gym 5 days a week and it was going great, but then my kid got really sick or I got bronchitis and then I didn't go for a week. I'm like, oh, and then you kind of go, well, I'm not following my goal, so then I quit. And I always say that one is being flexible is giving yourself grace. I use that word a lot the last few years, is being able to give yourself grace that, yes, this week I didn't do what I said I was going to do, but I can get back on track, rather than our brains, for a lot of different reasons, are very quick to get down on ourselves. I didn't do what I said I was going to do this week. I'm a failure. I never get this done right. I'm just going to quit. Versus, you know what? I didn't do exactly what I said. I think I have a good plan. I'm going to get back to it. So there's a lot of different approaches depending on what you're doing. Are you following your plan? Be honest, yes or no. And then that last part, which is know your why, I talk about, which is why was it so important for you right now to lose that weight or to save more money or to put your phone down more? There's usually a why behind it. And I always say the bigger your why, and it has to be your own. It can't be what your spouse wants or your kids want or your boss wants. Those can play a role. But the bigger your why, the more likely you're going to follow through when life gets in the way or when that goal is really hard. We set hard goals and we got to be able to give ourselves enough grace that I'm doing what I said I was going to do, but maybe this week I didn't advance as much as I thought in reaching that goal, but I'm okay with that because I'm going to go back to the drawing board if we have a couple more weeks and I'm not getting closer to that end goal, or I'm going to stick with this a little bit longer and have a breakthrough.
Yeah, I like that part of your book where at the end of each chapter, you're asking those questions, those reflective questions for each of the areas that you're talking about. I thought that was really great. One of the things that I like most about your book was positive psychology. And I am all over that. I love positive psychology. I use it a lot. How did you recognize marrying that with what you saw when you started working with athletes, elite athletes?
Well, the first thing you have to recognize is that the thing that often makes an athlete elite or a high performer in any area of this world is most of them have an element of what I call perfectionism, sometimes a tremendous amount of perfectionism. And most people in this world that do really high level things are perfectionists at some level, not everybody. And so we have to recognize that the brain of a perfectionist gets pretty negative pretty quick when things don't go right. We could do 10 things right, one thing wrong, and a perfectionist focuses on all the bad of what just happened there. So knowing that piece of what makes an elite performer great and knowing that we can eliminate it, so I say we have to manage it. We have to manage the cost of being a perfectionist. Part of that is helping somebody understand the role that positive psychology plays in that. And positive psychology is rooted in hope, but it can't be false hope. It's got to be rooted in optimism. And there are things that you can do in your brain, mental skill-wise, to either be more positive or not. The things that get perfectionists in trouble is primarily things like negative self-talk and getting really down on themselves. And that's where if they don't learn to manage that and have strategies, perfectionists either fall apart or become joyless and burnt out and want to quit. Because you need that perfectionism to be great, we've got to figure out ways to manage it. And part of that is understanding the role that positive psychology can play in a high performer to keep them moving forward despite all the adversities and setbacks that you have when you're trying to accomplish anything of significance.
So as a psychiatrist, what was your journey in working with elite athletes and consulting with universities and high schools and other organizations?
Yeah, it's a pretty unique one, to be honest with you. So, I went to medical school. It's going to be a surgeon, going to be an ER doc. For a variety of reasons, I picked psychiatry. Part of what I loved about psychiatry was that you got to have human connection and interactions. But during the time I went to school, medical school, and my 4 years of residency, the world changed, primarily driven by insurance companies. And they decided that they wanted the psychiatrist to be the pill pusher. And there's nothing wrong with medications. I'm a big believer in them. Anyone who knows me, it's a tool that's important for a lot of people. But essentially, they wanted us to do the diagnosis and prescribe the pills and let the therapist, psychologist do all the good work, the insight and the change. And I never accepted that, but it's the way it had to be. So 9/11 comes along, and I happen to live in Minot, North Dakota, where they have more nuclear warheads than anywhere in the world, honestly. They have an air base there that's 8 miles north of town. And because of 9/11, the in-house people were being deployed around the world, the mental health people. And we couldn't take care of active duty people in Minot. We could only take care of their dependents, their kids, their wives, husbands. But because of the work I did in addiction and different things, they got to know me. And they reached out and said, we could sure use your help. Here's the good news. Here's the bad news. The good news is we got a lot of B-52 bomber pilots who carry the nuclear warheads and some high-level commanders and things that are under a tremendous amount of stress, and you'd be really helping us. The bad news is you can't use any pills. And I'm like, okay, that's all I know how to do anymore. So I had to figure out how to put my money where my mouth was and go back to the skills I had learned to help people with anxiety and stress and focus, because pilots couldn't take medications or they were disqualified. And people who were in charge of the red button, or so to speak, the phone, they couldn't take medicines either for their mental health. And whether that's right or wrong is secondary from the fact that that's how it was. But that's how I entered the high performance world. And then I ran the addiction unit in Minot. And I really started to discover I loved high performers, because those struggling with addiction for the most part are not what we picture, the bums on the street. They're us. They're teachers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, people who take care of their kids at home, whether they be men or women, but they have an addiction that gets in their way. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool that if you could address that and manage it, the rest of their life came back. And so fast forward, I moved back to Nebraska. I was from Omaha, but I had an opportunity to move to Lincoln. And to be honest with you, again, another fluke. I was working at the hospital in Lincoln, just in charge of taking care of people that had mental health issues that maybe were in the intensive care unit. And a high-level athlete from the University of Nebraska had overdosed, and I just happened to be the one on. I got to take care of him. The cavalry came from the athletic department, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So they asked me if I could help out. And I told them no initially because I was too busy. But a year later, I reached out to Dr. Albers, who's in charge of athletic medicine, and asked if his offer still stood. And that's how I got introduced to the athletic department at Nebraska and started taking care of mental health patients. But then a lot of coaches were asking, well, do you do anything with performance? We don't either like who we have or we don't have somebody. And it just evolved into that world. So I really had to teach most of it to myself, to be honest with you. But my world has evolved tremendously into that world.
And how many athletic teams have you worked with since then? And a wide range.
Mm-hmm. Well, for a long time, it was just Nebraska. So I primarily worked with 3 teams there outside of all the athletes I worked with, which was women's gymnastics, women's bowling, women's volleyball. Those were coaches who had reached out, built relationships, and those were the teams, honestly, that were the most successful teams during all those years, all the national championships.
Yeah.
But Coach Booth from Creighton University had called Coach Cook and said, hey, we're in struggle. Do you have any recommendations? He recommended me, and I said, I don't want to help Creighton out. Even though I love Creighton, and I talk about that. I mean, I went to school there in the summer and I got my residency, but Coach Cook said, do it. And I asked Coach Osborne at the time, because I wasn't employed, but I said, how do you feel about that? He said, I helped out there. Great. And so that started my world into that. And for many, many years, I would say from 2008 to 18, primarily, that's all I did, helped out Creighton and Nebraska. But then as the athletic department at Nebraska decided you couldn't be an outside consultant, just kind of bridged into a lot of other areas and found out that a lot of people wanted your help. And so now I probably have 50 teams or 60 right now. 2/3 are volleyball, because that's my niche. Women's gymnastics, men and women's basketball, swimming and diving, soccer, softball. There's been a variety of sports, but at the end of the day, the vast majority of the teams I work with are small female teams, meaning 10 to 20, and the vast majority are volleyball teams. And I've developed a niche locally and nationally in the volleyball world, I guess is the way I would say it.
Well, I'm interested that you had so much involvement with women's teams. 2 points to this. How did it funnel down to women's teams? And I'm really interested from a psychology point of view. How is all of this different, do you think, and coaching and what you do different with women's teams versus men's teams?
I'll answer the second one first. There are differences between working with women's and men's teams and women and men coaches as well. It's not as much as you would think. And I think it's gotten less so as it's been more and more accepted. Women, I think, accepted it a little bit quicker, a little bit more willing to be vulnerable, a little bit more willing to say, I don't have it all figured out, willing to work on team dynamics a little quicker. And there are definitely differences in terms of how women like to hear things versus men, the tone, the body language, how loud things are, in terms of whether they even hear what a coach has to say. But ultimately, like most things, I always say that even I, as a perfectionist to some degree, we all think we have control over our lives and we know exactly what's going to happen. But I always tell people, at least in my experience, that most of the best things that happen to us, we can't plan. I mean, just about everything that I do, I would have said that's impossible. That's not my life story. It was a fluke. I mean, to be honest with you, at Nebraska, I shared this story, but the way I got into women's gymnastics was a female athlete came to me, even though I was just working one-on-one on mental health, and showed up late in the athletic department and said, I need some help. And I said, well, you need to talk to Dr. Albers. It goes through him. And he wasn't there. And she said, well, I need help staying on the balance beam, which is a very tough apparatus to stay on, probably the hardest in the world. And I said, okay. I said, when do you need help by? She said, well, we leave for the Big 12 championships tomorrow morning. So long story short, that year, I think 12 times she competed. Half the time she fell, half the time she didn't. I know nothing about gymnastics. I gave her a couple pointers. I guarantee you it had no impact. But she stayed on the balance beam at the Big 12 championships, and she thinks that it was me, which it wasn't. It was 50-50 proposition. But because of that, the next week she brought a friend of hers who said she needs help staying on the balance beam. And next thing you know, one of the coaches was saying to me, from the team, like, hey, would you be interested in helping the team? You've helped some of our athletes. And that's when I figured out I better learn about the sport because I knew nothing. Then Coach Cook was the same thing. He started working with some of his athletes. He was really interested in that piece and it slowly evolved that way with the female teams. And then I just realized I really enjoyed working with small groups. And some teams are really hard to navigate that are bigger. So again, like most things in my career, or maybe different than most, it all happened in ways you couldn't plan. But I had to be open to it and go, no, I'm not going to work with you. I'm here to help football and basketball. And I decided I was going to be really open to any opportunity. And given a choice, there was an opportunity where Coach Osborne said, if you want to work with football, you'll have to give up these other sports. And I said, not a chance. I love the coaches and athletes for those three sports. I don't need to work with the premier team. And I considered the teams I was with the premier teams. They just weren't the name teams. And
yeah.
I've continued that throughout my life. I could care less what level they are. I just want to work with teams that want to get better. I enjoy teams that are elite and trying to take it up another inch. But some of my best experiences have been with some really challenging teams, talent-wise, who have found ways to improve on and off the court.
Excellent.
It max out mindset. You describe 15 powers that will prepare individuals to achieve their goals. Are there any powers that you see are the most important ones, or that your athletes or coaches, you feel like they need to work on most?
There's a couple. Again, it's broken into 3 sections of those 15. Prepare your mind for battle, max out your mind, and then max out your team if you're on a team. So obviously, if you're not on a team, that last component, some of those powers aren't as important. But I even call 2 or more people, any group, as a team. It's going to be a micro team, but when 2 people work together, they're a team. The truth is, and I've even evolved since I've written the book, but my clarity on this is that you can train your mind like any physical skill. That is an absolute fact, and we do it every day. And so I really say that we got to be able to understand what I call the high-performance mental skills. So the power of the high-performance mental skills. And those are really things like goal setting, self-talk, arousal controls about getting your mind and your nervous system right for anything in sport, obviously. But even if you're giving a presentation in the business world and your heart's pounding and your mind's starting to go crazy, can you get closer to where you need to be so you can execute what you've trained? And then visualization, imagery could be called mental rehearsal, even in the business world.
Mhm.
Those are what I call the building blocks. And I tell everybody, like, look, if you wanted to develop a better serve, or if you wanted to get faster or stronger, or get an A in a class for the first time, if you ask the right experts, they're going to give you a series of instructions. Here's what you need to do every day. This will put you in the best chance to get an A in math, or to be able to jump 3 inches higher. And I don't think our specialty has done as great a job making sure people understand that if you want to develop an elite mindset, or a best version of your mindset, there are things you need to train. We can put together a recipe, because at the end of the day, those building blocks I told you lead to the most important thing for individuals. And that's what I call my 4 C's of an elite mindset, because these are the things we can train. We can train commitment, we can train confidence, we can train composure, and we can train concentration. Those are the things I believe that we can train to have an elite mindset for business, sport, or life. And we have to use our building blocks in some combination to get there. And we can train those 4 C's like any physical skill. And when I asked teams, all right, you want to win a championship, for example, I don't even write about this in my book, but I've gained so much clarity on this that, all right, so you want to win a championship. How much of your sport is mental? How much is physical? I write about this more in my workbook that's attached to my book now. A team might tell me it's 50% mental to be a volleyball player, or 70%. And I tell them I honestly don't know the right number, because it depends. But I ask them, say it'd be Nebraska or Creighton volleyball, how much time does the typical D1 volleyball player spend working on their mental game? The most common answer, not enough. So I say that's the first half of our why. Why are we training mindset? You told me your sport's mental. We don't train it enough. But the part that gets them, that leads back to the 4 C's, is, all right, so you say you want to make the Final Four, or you want to win a state championship. All right, you're playing for the state championship tonight, and it's 13 all in set 5 going to 15, and you're at the service line. How much of that serve is mental? How much is physical now? And that's the real aha moment, because the most common answer I get from an Olympian down to a high school, 95% all mental. And I say, isn't it amazing? Then in the goals that we set that are often our biggest or most important, depending on the situation, it could be all mental. Now, if it's 22-10 in set 3 and you're about ready to sweep to win a state championship, serve not very mental. You have a 95 in math and you need a 40 on the final to keep your A, probably not that mental. But in those big moments, and it's 13 all, or you're down 1 at the free throw line with a second to go and you need to make the free throws and you get fouled, you make them, we win, you miss them, we lose. There's a much bigger mental component, and can we train our brain for those moments? So if there's one thing on the individual side, it is training those 4 C's of an elite mindset and making sure that you know you can train those like any physical skill. On the team side, there's 2 things that stand out. The teams that accept their roles are the most successful teams. And the teams that learn to build deep relationships and love each other like athletes do, those are the 2 ingredients to me that lead to ultimate trust and are clearly the difference makers on teams that max out. I always say you have to have enough talent to be in the discussion to win championships. I mean, you can have a great culture. If you don't have the talent, it doesn't matter. But it's not the talent that decides how far a team's going to go if you have enough of it. It's role acceptance. It's building deep relationships. It's other things like communication. But those 2, accepting your roles and learning to love each other and build the relationships, are the 2 separators that I've learned more than anything else in my career.
And it seemed like you learned the love for each other in your involvement with the military people. It's like you saw the SEALs. What made them special? What held them together in extreme adversity? And it was this bond that they had.
So what's interesting about that is that, of course, I have a Navy SEAL partner in one part of what I do in this world. And of course, I learned a lot of that from him. What was really interesting is Coach Cook in Nebraska volleyball. He was one that was more technical and tactical, and he trained people hard, but he didn't build the relationships like he needed to earlier. And I'm open about writing about it. He approved it and he's written about it. But he thought Jack, my Navy SEAL partner, retired commander, would tell it to him differently. Just train harder, break them. And he said, Coach, the reason why Navy SEALs are the most leading fighting force in the world And the reason why we're willing to die for the person on our right or left, I know for you guys, it's willing to fight for each other for wins and losses. But the reason why we're willing to die for each other, one, two, go back out on the battlefield and drag a person out who's probably not going to live because we want to bring the body home to the family, even though we might get killed doing it, is because of the relationships we built. Yes, you got to have the training and the skill and the technical, but once they get through training camp and all that hard stuff to be a SEAL, then it's all about brotherhood and connection. And that's something that Coach Cook really learned to value. And female coaches are way better at that quicker than male coaches. And female teams are better at figuring that out than male teams. But when they do on the men's side, both coaching and team-wise, it just takes them to a whole nother level. But so without the connection piece, when the stress hits, people fall apart.
Yeah, that's really interesting because women are often described as very relationship focused. And so you would say, well, naturally for a team of women, that makes sense. But for me, it's really interesting. Actually, when push comes to shove, this is also important for teams comprised of men as well.
I don't think at the end of the day, there's not much different. It's just they get there differently. Women have to build the relationships first to get there. Sometimes guys need to compete really hard together in the summer and different things and bond that way and compete hard with each other to do it. But the outcome has to be the same. And it does the same thing. It's communication and the way you resolve conflict. Some of my other ingredients of elite teams. And men get in trouble with conflict because their fight or flight kicks in. And so they tend to get into physical or verbal fights pretty quick. But they also tend to let go of things a little bit quicker, where females are less likely to get into that, but then tend to talk behind each other's backs and not resolve the conflict with the person they need to resolve it with. But the thing I try to get them to understand is that conflict is a pivotal part of great teams. What there's an absence of on great teams is the conflict lingering. And so a lot of people think that the teams that were great or had a great outcome probably was an easy year for them. Everything went their way. There's no drama or conflict. I'm like, the great teams all have conflict, but the great teams do not sit in that. They don't let it linger or fester for very long and they work through it. So we talk a lot about how do you do that because it's not easy today for kids and it's not really that easy for adults. But with phones today and texting and social media, there's so many ways to get resolving conflict and communicating wrong, especially when the stress hits. When there's no stress, it's not that hard to do any of these things well. It's when the stress hits, either in dynamics of the team, we're not playing well, your boss is a jerk, not treating you well. There's 100 different reasons, but when the stress hits and the conflict hits, that's when it gets really hard to communicate and resolve things. And that's when our fight or flight or our brain starts to go haywire. That's when we need the mental skills, not when everything's going our way in this world. It's not that hard to stay composed when everything's going right for any of us. Things are going well for us. Yeah, we're pretty calm, cool, and collected. It's when things start to go haywire, do we have strategies to not make it worse and to get back to a way to solve the problem and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Linda and I were on a bowling team when we were growing up. We were also on a softball team. Mm-hmm. We were both musicians. And I would say generously, Linda, we were not elite in any of those activities.
No, not really.
No. I played flute and practiced a whole lot, and I never seemed to be able to move up very many chairs. Is there any time that individuals should just recognize that they are not going to be elite in a skill set? Or do you think that there's always hope for people to improve?
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple things is one, you got to define what it means to be elite, right? And I call that your best version. Depending on how you define things, well, in any sport, well, if you compare yourself to Jordan Larson in volleyball, no one else is elite. But there's plenty of elite volleyball players. They may not be as elite as her. They may not even be a Division I athlete. So part of the way I do it is, did you put yourself in a position to max out, especially when it matters? Because we talk a lot with teams. There's a difference between regret and no regret at the end of the year. You may not hold the trophy or even reach your goal. If your life is only defined by reaching every one of those goals, it's a pretty miserable life.
Yeah.
High performers in any endeavor, but again, focusing on sport, when they reflect back, they understand the difference between regret and no regret, meaning we didn't reach our goal, or we did, but there was nothing else we could have done. I put in the work. I did the best I could. I did the best I could for my team. I accepted my role. I was a great teammate. And that's a very great way to live, meaning you can look back and go, no, that was an awesome year. We built relationships. We didn't want to take our jerseys off, versus there are a lot of things we could have done differently, but we didn't do it. We didn't resolve those conflicts. We were selfish, whatever they may be, and that's regret. And so you don't have to think of yourself as being the one who made the top chair in flute. If your ceiling was to be third chair and you got there, you maxed out. And I think you have to be able to be honest with yourself and go, you know what? I put in all the work. I prepared a lot in the flute world. Now you can also go, you know what? I didn't really care that much. I also did this, this, and this, and it wasn't that important to me to the top chair. There were other things I really could have done more, but I just chose not to, versus, man, I put in the work. Not everyone gets to be the top chair or get the A in the class. But at some point you have to look back and go, I can live with this. I did what I said I was going to do for me and my team, my family, and that's the best I can do. And the vast majority of us, honestly, that's how we should live our life, because most of us aren't elite in the way that we're thinking about, but we're elite because we maxed out. Mm-hmm. And I call it a high performer. And you don't have to be the best in the world or top 1% to be a high performer. You have to be someone who's committed to being the best you can be and having hope. And when I talk about hope, I talk about grit in my book, The Power of Grit. Mm-hmm. I haven't even put this in my book, but this is what I tell people today, is that the most important ingredient of grit, of those four, there's interest and purpose and practice, and is hope. And what I tell people is that in the grit world, to me, hope is not false hope. Hope means that because of the way I prepare, because of my own attitude and effort, and because if I'm on a team, I know my teammates and coaches believe in me, that I truly believe what's about to happen is going to be great. I missed that last shot. The next one's going in. I shanked that pass. I got this next one. We lost set one. We're going to win set two. I got to be in that class. Back to the drawing board. Because I prepare well, I've got a great attitude. I know people believe in me. I've got my resources. I'm going to get an A on that next test. And people that are gritty truly believe that even though the last minute wasn't so great, or the last hour, or the last day, that what's about to happen is going to be great. And it can't be false hope, because if you haven't prepared right, you don't have a great attitude and effort about things, you haven't put in the work, you don't know if your teammates or coaches or bosses or whoever, your parents, believe in you, you're not going to be able to be gritty. You'll go to worry and doubt in your brain. I'm not good enough. I can't do this, versus no, that play didn't go my way. I've got this next one. And we can train grit like any physical skill, which is cool. And gritty people in sport and life are perseverant. They deal with adversity. They bounce back. And they believe that through things they can control, that tomorrow is going to be a better day.
Love it.
That's really good. Okay. So I want to tell you something. I played pickleball, I think, 3 times this week. I'm not on an elite team by any means. I'm not even on a team. We get together, we swat the ball.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you, since reading your book, and like I said, I'm not on a team, but I really liked the team work that you did. I can kind of consider all 25 of us that play together as a team, and we just swap around. And mm-hmm. I've been really cognizant of how I am on the group, what's coming out of my mouth as I'm sweating and swatting the ball around. And I also realized that some of the things that have come out of my mouth are things that I have to change about my internal language, mm-hmm. and I have to change my self-talk. So one thing I wanted to thank you about with your book is that it's not just for the elite athlete. It is for the person who has to get up on Monday morning and trudge off to work, and for people who are just playing recreational sports. You can incorporate a lot of those key components into just like your everyday life.
Mm-hmm. The reason why I like to spend so much energy telling people about the elite is because what we really recognize is that the elite performers struggle with self-talk. They struggle with confidence. They struggle with composure. They struggle with everything you just said you struggle with. But what they tend to do better than the average person, until the average person does it better, is they have awareness and strategy, which I always talk about. And I talk about it more today than even in my book, which is first you have to have awareness. My self-talk is hurting me perform. My heart is pounding or I'm shaky. I'm not going to perform as well. So I say you have to have awareness first and then a strategy to cope with it. Replace that self-talk with a strategy. Use it a deep breath or two to bring down my heart rate. Because if you don't have those both, you can't make change. You have to be aware first and then a strategy. I think the average athlete or performer in this world and anything they do, it gives them comfort and hope to know that the best struggle with it too. Because in our minds, a lot of times we think that the best have it all figured out, and that's why they're the best. Jordan Larson doesn't struggle with her self-talk. That's why she's great. No. Since my book's come out and my next book, going to have a lot with her in there because of my work with her. What does she struggle with the most? Self-talk and confidence.
Wow.
Talked about it on my podcast. But if you study the greats, especially female athletes and high performers, the common themes are they struggle with self-talk and confidence and to some degree composure. And that's primarily it. And they're all trainable. And every high performer I work with struggles with self-talk, confidence, and composure at some level, some more than others, or they did it one time and have really got a good job of what I call mastering it because of awareness and strategy. It's great that you have that awareness because your inner chatter dictates on the pickleball court what's about to happen. I wish that if you just told yourself, I'm going to hit this down the line perfect, that it goes right where you say it does. It doesn't work that way. But I always say the odds change. That if our brain is saying the right things, it changes the odds of about what's to happen. It doesn't guarantee success. Or we just tell ourselves, I'm going to get an A on every test and I get an A. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But what we say to ourselves really matters. One of the things that's been really cool is that so many female athletes have figured out, and high performers, that if they learn to talk to themselves like a good friend, the things that we often say to ourselves, we would never say to a friend or a sibling, our loved ones or spouse, but we say them to ourselves. I suck. I'm no good. I never get it right. Somebody else is struggling that's a friend. You're like, no, you got this. Let's figure it out together. So you give them encouragement, a strategy, but to us, we're terrible. We're no good. I always blow it, And so it's cool that you can learn that everybody struggles with stuff because I think it gives us hope. But then you got to be willing to do something about it. And then you can see it translate into overall performance over time, not just on the pickleball court, but in your everyday life, especially if you're got kids. There's the challenges of being a parent and it has never been more today. So, but how you navigate that world and what we say to ourselves and to our kids matter.
So, Linny, you were engaged in negative self-talk. Is that what you were doing on the pickleball court?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So what strategy did you use? I know Doc in his book has like the substitution strategy or the physical cueing, like, no, keep the racket open or whatever physical cueing. What did you do?
I was trying to be more graceful. You used the word grace, and that probably was it more than not. I'm not, it's pickleball. It's not college volleyball, but it's a skill because just like volleyball, pickleball's pretty quick and you're swatting it back and forth. So I'm going to say that I am learning to do it. I struggle because it's not automatic yet in that sport. I am better at showing grace to myself when I don't have to think too quickly.
Yeah.
So I have to say I struggle with it. I know that it's out there, but then I don't have always time, Nance, to like re-say it. But I'll give you an example. I was on a team and my partner said I peaked out. She had hit some really good ones. She said, I think I peaked out. And I didn't know what to say at that moment, but I realized that Larry would figure out what to say at that moment. And I didn't because somebody else is whacking a ball at me and I'm trying to get it across the net. But when she did not max out and she hit a couple good ones, I was right there reinforcing, look, you didn't max out. You still got mojo. Let's keep going kind of thing. But I realized that I need more of those immediate thought replacement skills so that in the thrust of the play, and it's so quick, that the responses are more immediate.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. So what would be those really good immediate things to, oh, I can't believe I didn't get it. What would be some really good replacement ones?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a lot of time. So it's whatever you can do to move on. I always say that the people who move on to the next moment, meaning especially getting back to present, right? We're not still thinking about what just happened. Like I blew it or I'm going to mess up again. I think what's interesting is for a lot of people, especially in a quick sport like that, is just to have one or two cue reset words. So it could be related to the technical aspects of your thing. Like, hey, get your feet ready again. Like something that you have to do in between points to be ready to go. Now they're going to serve you. What's your key? You got to get your feet right. You got to keep, good eye discipline. And you remind yourself the key technical skill, one or two words that you got to do. Because if you're telling yourself feet, or eyes, or follow through, like maybe you didn't fall through a couple times, and we're trying to hit it too perfect. And you're like, you know what? No, I just got to follow through. So you tell yourself that, and now you're not thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Or hope I don't screw up on the next one. You're just focusing on what I call an instruction word or a cue word. So in a fast slowing sport like that, either something like that or just a restart word. It could be just like next point.
I like that. That is what you said in that book, that it's just one or two like mantras. It's those quick mantras. Because I know volleyball, is pretty quick too, but those quick mantras. So that's what I got to do.
And then you notice that you had an opportunity to impact your partner.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you find that you say things to your partner that resonates, try saying them to yourself. You helped your partner move on. Why don't you help yourself move on? But again, you don't have a lot of time. So obviously there's a few seconds between points, but I wouldn't even worry about it within the play itself. When the play's over, we've got 5 seconds to reset in pickleball. What do I have to do to reset to be present? Could be a cue word like that. Could be an instruction word. It could just be next play, next point. We've got this. And so you start to practice it because it's different for everybody. What might work for you? Jordan Larson, she likes someone to tell her a strategy. She doesn't like to be touched by a teammate. Other teammates like their hand held for a second. She's like, I don't like being touched. So when my teammates touch me, it makes me uptight. But she never told her teammates for a while. Then she became a good teammate and said, you know what? I really don't like it when you pat me on the butt when I make a mistake, but I do like you to tell me what's open. Someone else is like, look, just squeeze my hand for a second and tell me you got this. Like, so when you play with a consistent partner or team, we spend a tremendous amount of energy making sure we truly understand what each person needs to help them move on. Because when you're on a team, I always say first, you have to be responsible to get your self-talk right or your reset words or cues. Like it starts with you to move on. But I say the best self-talker in the room on the team, your brain will fail you sometimes. Our brains love to mess with us. But on a great team, and a team can be 2 people, if your teammates know, or your coaches, but especially your teammates, know what you need to move on to the next point, and you're willing to let them in, they can help you move on to the next point. You don't have to do it on your own on a great team. When you're swimming, you do. You're playing tennis, you do. Pickleball with another person if it's partners. Volleyball. You have teammates that can help you get out of your brain if you're stuck and you're beating yourself up. But they have to know what you need. And then if they're patting you on the butt and you're thinking to yourself, please don't touch me, they're not helping you move on. But we usually guess wrong. We usually do what we like. And then our teammates, they don't tell us exactly. Like a team I was meeting with, Jordan Larson was with me, and she told them the story. They were like, Jordan, why didn't you tell your teammates you don't like to be touched? And she's like, I don't know. I'm a people pleaser. And, I know they mean well. And, I didn't want conflict. But the truth is when they start to touch me, I get really tight and think to myself, why are you doing this? She said, but when I became a better teammate, I told them that doesn't work for me. If you want to help me de-stress and move on, this is what I need from you. Another teammate says this. And when you're vulnerable and open about what you need, I call that my third ingredient of confidence. My teammates and coaches can help me move on to the next point. Second ingredient is my self-talk. Those 2 are the keys to great teams. What I do to myself and then what my teammates and coaches do, because ultimately the teams that move on to the next play better, next point, whether you have 5 seconds or 30 to move on, those teams perform better. Because if we're stuck in the past or the future, worrying about what just happened and what's about to happen, we don't perform our best in this world. That's not just in sport, that's in anything. And it's cool that when you recognize it, you can start to help yourself and help others. And overall performance over time changes for the good.
Thank you for that. I'm glad there's no butt smacking in pickleball. We got rackets that we smack back and forth. I don't know if that's part of the rules or not, but you clink each other's rackets and you move on.
I love it.
Okay. Well, tell us about Performance Mountain, your consulting firm that provides consultation.
Yeah, sure. So actually, Performance Mountain has sort of evolved into what I call Max Out Mindset now. And so Performance Mountain was started with my Navy SEAL partner. We added Danny Woodhead from the NFL, and we were doing a lot of business consulting. And when COVID hit, that diminished to some degree. But the other piece of it is that I love working with teams. And Danny and Jack are both retired, and they like playing golf and doing their thing, as they should. And I'm the only one that really loves working with teams. And so I really do it all by myself now. I do have another partner named Jess Connect, who's a volleyball coach and a mindset coach, and Scott Papik, who helps me out tremendously and has his own book, Age is Your Edge, and he's phenomenal. So Performance Mountain has sort of merged into what I call Max Out Mindset, my own brand now. That's my podcast. That's my book. Almost everything I do today is through that brand. A little bit through Performance Mountain, but almost all through Max Out Mindset. But we just realized that Jack and I were helping so much. I write about it in my book with Nebraska. And when Nebraska made the decision to not allow outside consultants, there's so many other people that were saying we need help in the business world and the sports world. And so we just decided to take all the things that we were doing at Nebraska and Creighton and give it to other people. Who doesn't want to max out? And it's never been harder today to do that, right? I say because there's never been more psychological distress in the world between COVID and politics, society pressure, social media, and on and on. Being a student athlete, if that's, or a coach or a high performer, it's really, really hard to navigate the world today. It's not that kind of a world, at least in my observation. And so there's more challenges than ever than trying to max out your business or your team or just yourself. And there haven't been enough people that have been able to articulate on how to do it, in my opinion. Meaning, like I said, you want to lose weight, you go to Weight Watchers or go to an expert, a nutritionist. You want to save more money, you go to a financial person and so forth. But what if you want to improve your confidence or your composure or your focus? And you don't want pills for it. Not that pills are bad, like I've said, but you want to work on these things. Coach will say, I need you to be mentally tougher right now. What the heck does that mean, coach? Right? Or I need you to relax right now. And you're like, well, coach, if I knew how to relax, I would. What do I do? Coach usually says, I don't know, but better figure it out or you're not going to play. That's the fault of our profession too, which is, well, of course, you want to jump higher. Someone's going to tell you how. All right, I want to be more confident. Great. That's really important. How do I do it, doc? I don't know. Better figure it out. That'd be a terrible thing for me to say, right? So I got to be able to tell them, why do we train our mind? Go back to your sport or your high performance endeavor is part mental, part physical. And in the big moments, it can be almost all mental. That's my why. Why are we training it? Well, then if I don't tell them what we train, it's just important to train your mind, but I can't tell you what to do. Well, that's no good. So I got to tell you, what do we train? We train goal setting, self-talk, arousal control, mindfulness, visualization. They lead to commitment, confidence, concentration, composure. That's what we train. Now, if they say, oh, great, we can train confidence and composure. Well, how do we do it, doc? Well, I don't know. You see, so we got to be able to train. Why do we train it? What do we train and how do we train it? And that's pretty much what I'm obsessed with doing, which is if we don't explain the why, you can't get buy-in, especially with kids, but adults do, especially when it's something as different as the mind. What do we train? Oh, wow, we can actually train that. It's not just be mentally tougher, just relax. Mm-hmm. When you don't know how to do it, like, well, I don't know how to be mentally tougher. Coach, if I knew how to do that, of course I'd be mentally tougher. How do I do it? I don't know. Right? So why, what, and how? And when we can do all three of those, which I believe we can train in order, the why, the what, and the how, it gets pretty cool because people see like, wow, my performance has never been better in my family. I love it when the parents come and tell me, you know what, though, this has definitely helped them in their sport. But boy, they've learned to not freak out on me when I tell them to do something or when they disagree with me. They're like, Mom, I need to go and calm down for a couple of minutes and come back and talk. They're like, I see the way they interact with me. They're more present. Because I always tell you, everything you train for your sport helps you even more in life, which is why my philosophy is helping high performers with a positive psychology framework by teaching mental skills to help you max out in life and sport. Life is before sport, because I believe all the things that we train for sport, we can train to be a better spouse, a better parent, better coworker, better teammate, better friend. Because of course, if you can stay composed and not freak out and manage when you're triggered by something, how you respond to it, of course, we're going to function better in this world. So that's where it's really fun for me, especially in the 15 to 22-year-old range. I don't think I would do it as much with that age range if I didn't think it helped them as much in life as sport. Because I can work with so many elite people that really need it for their sport. But I'm a big believer that we can really impact people from 15 to 22 to get them to know within reason they can do anything they want, especially women. And that probably more importantly, they know how they want to be treated by others and won't accept anything less. So that when they get out of high school and then especially college, their self-esteem is pretty good. They're not in a relationship that's abusive or in it for the wrong reason because of someone's looks or money, but they treat them poorly. And I think we can train all that. I know we can. I really believe if we can empower young people for those things, that's where it really gets pretty cool for me. Because it's a hard life to navigate today, I think, for everybody, but especially young people.
Yeah, that's such a hopeful way of thinking about our lives too, that even as adults, we can grow, we can learn, we can continue to train our minds. It's that growth mindset that has changed the way people even think about themselves as adults and what they can be and what they can accomplish.
Mm-hmm. And if an adult doesn't have a growth mindset, how are you going to model that behavior for your kids?
Right.
And so when adults are afraid to fail or afraid to grow or don't believe they can get better and don't recognize that through effort, you can still change and improve rather than this is the best I can't be any better than this. This is just who I am. Now, there is obviously a max out point for everybody. Mm-hmm. Meaning you may not be a concert flutist, but maybe there's a little bit higher level if it's important to you versus going, I'll never be better than this. This is who I am. At some point, there may be a truth to that because we all can't be the best at everything, but we can get much better at recognizing that I don't know if I can grow any more in that area because I've done everything I can, but I can maintain instead of go backwards, or I can make people around me better. I might not personally be any better in my sport or my performance, but how I talk and communicate to others. And again, I truly believe that the U.S. won gold in the Olympics for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons they won it for the first time in history last year was because Jordan Larson, prior to that last quad, was at best just an average teammate and leader. She would tell you that if she was sitting here, said it on my podcast. And she came back and she wanted to do it different. She wanted to be a better teammate. She had a teammate tell her the year before, I don't know why you think you can hold me accountable on the court when you don't talk to me off the court.
Wow.
And it kind of broke her. She learned for a lot of reasons and is open talking about it, which I'm so proud of her because I don't talk about people I work with specifically, but she talks about it a lot. And I'm like, why do you tell people? She said, because I want people to know it's okay to work on your mind. Hers wasn't for mental health. It was for leadership and mindset. But I want people to know it's okay to do that. You can be near the best in the world, but there's things I can get better at. And she said I was at best an average teammate and leader. And she wanted to be a great at it because she was a great volleyball player, but she didn't always make people around her better. So that's got me long circle back at what I was saying. You might not elevate your game or your ability to play, but maybe you make people in your flute section or others in better because you give them confidence or you support them or encourage them and you shout out praise to them and they feel a little bit better about themselves or you help them with a problem in their world. Jordan made her teammates better. She's a better leader and a better teammate. And it's one of many reasons why I think they won the gold for first time in history, because you can impact winning in a lot of ways in this world. It doesn't have to be just what you do yourself performance-wise. And so that's where it gets really cool because it's all trainable through growth mindset or understanding how to use positive psychology in a healthier way with your teammates or other people in your life. The best in the world don't have that all figured out, but they have a growth mindset. And she knew that she wanted to do it better, but she didn't know how. So the willingness to then reach out and say, hey, could I get some help with this? One of the best in the world at anything could say, I'm not going to tell anyone I have any faults. I'll never reach out to anyone. I don't want anyone to know that I'm less than what I could be, but they have a growth mindset. And I want to do it better.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be okay asking for help to get that.
That's fabulous. So you mentioned your podcast. We'll put a link in our show notes so our listeners can find your podcast. What are you working on in the coming year that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, I'm putting together a video series for teams and for people that want to learn all my principles, but don't have access to me, or their price point doesn't have access to me. So that's primarily for teams. It's going to be called Max Out Mindset. Well, the first one I'm putting out is for volleyball, a video series, and it's 7 sessions over 4 hours with lots of videos and a workbook for teams either that don't have access, like I said, or maybe their price point is such that they still want to learn it, but they want to learn it more than just reading a book. So they want to see it and listen and interact. And then I'll make one for just any team, but volleyball is the first one, but the overlap is tremendous. And then my goal for 2023 is to write a specific book for volleyball. So even though my book has a lot in there, as you know, because of that world I live in, there's a lot more that's happened in the last 3 years. Again, starting with Jordan Larson and other national team members and just other teams that I've been able to work with and athletes, that I have a lot more to share in the volleyball world. So I don't know if it's going to be called Max Out Mindset for Volleyball or what it's going to be, but it's going to be about teams that I work with that have made history, including the Olympic team for volleyball. Although I didn't work with the team itself, I think I had an impact on some of them. But try to share what I've learned from some of the great high school teams in the area that have won multiple state championships, and trying to hone in on the last 3 years, because the world has changed tremendously in the last 3 years in terms of all the things we've talked about, some bad and some not so bad, but it's changed the way I view a lot of the things I even teach today. And so I want to update. It's not opposite thinking. It's just more evolved thinking in some areas that I want to update. My goal is to have the Max Out Mindset volleyball book out this year.
That sounds really great. Where can people best stay in touch with you?
So I pretty much hang out on Twitter, Doc_Elite Mind. I do have an Instagram page, but it's not run by me. I don't know how to do most of this stuff. Twitter's not all I can handle. I mean, we have a Facebook page, but Doc_Elite Mind really is where I put all of my best stuff out on, to be honest, on Twitter. MaxOutMindset.com has all our services, but probably more importantly, the free stuff like my Max Out Mindset podcast. I've been lucky to have many of the best coaches and athletes in the world on it. Again, more volleyball than others, but lots of other sports and sometimes in the business world. And then the Max Out Mindset podcast is on like the platforms that you're on, but all of them are archived on our website that people can go back and watch over the last 3 years. And I've got an exciting one coming out from 2 beach volleyball players that are number 3 in the world right now, Taryn Clough and Kristen Nuss. That's next. And Lexi Zeiss, who's a 17-year-old gymnast who just won a world championship gold medal from Omaha, Nebraska. And Taryn Clough and Kristen's just came out. And then I have a Lincoln Lutheran coach named Sue Ziegler, who just went 40-0 in volleyball, and her team just won another state championship. And she's one of the gurus of volleyball in the state of Nebraska, and she'll be on next. So Taryn and Kristen's from beach volleyball I just released this week. John Cook and Kirsten Bernthal Booth and a number of other cool athletes and coaches are on there. They're all free.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely put a link in our show notes for all of that. Thank you so much for joining us on the front porch. This has been a great way to start 2023 and thinking about our mindset, the way we talk to ourselves. Thanks for all the tools that you've shared with us and the positive philosophy mindset. This has just been fabulous. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you guys. I'm really curious to see how her pickleball game evolves.
Well, I'll be channeling you. Next point. Next point. Next point.
Right.
I got my skills set now. I'm ready.
Just don't say I really suck next point, you know?
Nope. No negative self-talk.
Okay.
But thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Wow, Linny, I really enjoyed our conversation with Doc. I love the positive psychology. I love the growth mindset that we can all continue to develop and grow, that mind skills can be trained, that we're not who we always have been, that our skill set can be improved, this was just a great way to start the new year.
I think so too. I learned a lot by reading his book. I enjoyed him as a person.
Yeah.
I can see how the teams that he works with and the individuals that he works with really benefit from him. And the fact that he is going to put this video series together, I think is going to really even help more people that don't live in Nebraska and aren't rubbing elbows with him all the time. So I'm excited to see what else he can put out there.
Yeah, but he works with teams all over the United States, too.
Yeah, he does. I won't be part of them unless he comes to York and is going to watch me play pickleball, which I don't think he is, and help me to improve my pickleball game. But he's going to get himself out there. And the podcast is really interesting, too. It's another way for people to learn from him. Interesting, fantastic interview. Our next book for February is going to be Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And I'm looking forward to that book.
Yeah, that book has gotten a lot of buzz, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I haven't yet, and looking forward to discussing it with you.
Oh.
So thanks for listening, everyone. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
All right, Linny. See you next time.
Okay, Nan. See ya next year.